chance to join, but I wanted to begin the broadcast now, just so that you know that this thing is on and happening. And if you have any questions that you would like to bring up before we start, that's perfectly welcome as well. I'm going to give it just another 2 minutes or so to make sure we've got most of the people that might want to attend. That this stuff is loaded after the page itself loads. So adding all of this additional text doesn't slow down the performance of the web page from a human's perspective. But as I said, my short-term goal, if time opens up in 2017, would be to handcraft something like this for describing a LawHelp statewide legal information site, because we would only have to write a limited number of those by hand. And then the next
and this isn't something your user would see. It's something that gives you better results in the search engine.
Correct. What we would expect to see, and it's important to realize that if this works, we may actually see search traffic decrease, because if you are able to express to the search engine, for example, this website only serves people inside the borders of Pennsylvania, or has information concerned with activity inside the borders of Pennsylvania, or whatever nuance that carries. Somebody searching for divorce in the Solomon Islands may not see your divorce article when they were before, because Google said, what an excellent divorce article. I don't understand that these things are geographically bounded, so I will serve it all over the world. And so you may actually see less traffic. We've been experimenting with a distinction between what I'm calling, and I may need a better name for this. I think Reese had some suggestions, so maybe he will pipe up in a moment. But a distinction between what we're calling directly engaged users and indirectly engaged users. So an engaged user is someone who not only visits the site, but opens some of our content. If somebody comes and they just look at the homepage and then they leave, we can't really make a strong case that we have assisted them in any way. But if they come and they open a legal information resource, we have at least a little bit more insight into whether it's possible that we were helpful to them. And we have all kinds of ideas about how to, make stronger inferences in the future, but I won't get into that now.
So when you're talking about opening a resource, is that different from visiting a deeper page? Because, 50% of our traffic, well, actually, it's finally in the last year or so gone down, so that not all our traffic comes through our homepage. People used to come to our homepage all the time, but now, of course, with Google, people are getting, I think, what you're talking about directly. But is that what you call opening a resource? Basically, they're visiting a more specific page, or they actually
not necessarily. I would make a distinction between a deeper page and a. I've tried a couple of different terms for it. The term the consultant used in this Stanford conference was a satisfaction page. I think of it as setups and punchlines. So this is a setup page, right? It's just giving you information about what kinds of things are on offer. This is a deeper page. You're deeper into the site, but it's still just a setup page, right? This is a punchline.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so it's actually when they're opening one of these pages. Well,
This is a punchline page. This is a user that we have engaged. And then the question
that's what I call a deeper page. Yeah, so that has real useful content on it rather than just table contents.
And so we measure the proportion of people that reach these punchline pages, these deeper pages, against the total number of people that visit the website. And the ratio there, if you say, if 7 out of 10 people read a legal article, or open a legal article, I should say, we can't measure whether they've read it. Then we say that
figure out how much time they spend on the page. That's how we try to figure that out.
We look at that. I'd like to install a tool that will let us look at how far down the page they scroll. We were talking with the LawHelp New York team about standing up tests where we would have little reader comprehension quizzes at the end, and we would emphasize that we're not keeping track of their answers. It's just for their own purposes to test themselves on whether they understood the material. But we would track whether they chose to take the quiz, with the assumption being that people that choose to take the quiz wanted to make sure they understood the article, which means that the article was likely something they thought would be helpful to them.
Yeah, we found that really successful.
Oh,
just
great.
A lot of resources. We do that on Mass Legal Help. We have in our unemployment insurance section, and it's really interesting because we have those quizzes on, and they're not graded. You don't get a score.
Exactly.
And what we do, we can track how many people answer correctly, but they always get a chance to go back, and we give them the correct answer. Even if they get the wrong answer, we say, no, here's the right answer. Do you want to try again? That kind of thing for each individual question. But it's interesting because we have them across the board on unemployment insurance. And I think there's 7 times more people are going for the questions on, can I get unemployment insurance if I quit, than all the other questions put together. So that's
right, which is really interesting. I would be so excited to look at how that plays out on say LawHelp New York. The LawHelp New York team may want to talk with you about that, because it's interesting that you're tracking the correct answers. My instinct, without having field tested this yet, we haven't had an opportunity, would be that if people know that you're going to check whether they're right or wrong, if people know that you're going to record whether they're right or wrong, the whole point would be to let them know. But if you're making a record somewhere, it might make them self-conscious. But if that's not the case, then that might be an interesting thing to explore as well.
We don't tell them.
Oh, okay.
And I don't think there's any reason to tell them, because it's really, test yourself. And why we did this is because we were trying to find out if people actually understand the material we're putting out there. That's what we're testing.
Right.
We're testing our materials. And 70% of the people who take the quizzes get the answer correct. Now we don't know if I don't think it's sophisticated enough to know whether they get it right the first time, but I think we probably could have figured that out from the numbers. I just haven't spent enough time.
And if you found an article where most of the people were flunking the quiz, then that would be an indicator that you should rewrite the article. Yeah, no, I understand the appeal entirely, and if it doesn't dissuade people from engaging with the quiz, then that's definitely something to think about. I know that the LawHelp New York team is looking into the right way to design that initiative now. So I would bet that they will want to reach out to you about that, but I won't put words in their mouth. Sorry, LawHelp New York. Work it out amongst yourselves. But anyway, right, so this is a satisfaction page. This is a punchline, whatever you want to call it, a deeper page. And the difference between direct engagement and indirect engagement is if you are served this page as a search result in Google and you come directly into it, then you are an engaged user. You count as somebody that we have, delivered a punchline to. But it happened, because of search engine optimization or because of a link on a partner website. It doesn't say much about whether the experience that we're offering internally in terms of our, the flow of the homepage, the way our subtopic layout works, etc., whether this is serving to funnel people through. And so the indirect people are the people who view a resource without starting on it, as a proportion of all of the people who start on a page that is not a resource, more generally. And what I would expect to happen, even if overall traffic goes down, I would expect the proportion of search engine traffic that is, direct engagements, as opposed to links to setup pages, to go up. So when you look at, if we do this schema thing and if it pays off in the way we're hoping it will, search engine traffic may go up, it may go down. It depends on what kind of traffic you're getting and how high quality that traffic is right now. But I would expect that among the search engine traffic, much more of it will be into punchlines and much less of it will be into setups. That's sort of the concept.
Caroline, this is Michelle. From LawHelp New York. Can I ask what tool you're using to do We're
not using a tool. We worked with one of the literacy champions to write thing, and we had, we are one of those outliers. We were in Web GUI for years, and we just moved to Drupal 2 years ago, and now it's I think we use a web form, a Drupal web form, but it's customized. And I can send you the link to what it is, but it's coded. But we have a content type now that's a quiz, so it's not. Unfortunately, I tried all kinds of tools and I couldn't get exactly what I wanted, so we ended up building it.
Okay.
The tool that we're looking at is something that we. Do you remember the URL, Michelle?
It may be iSpring Suite.
iSpring Solutions, here we go.
iSpring Solutions.
The tool that we're looking at is a tool called iSpring. The reason why we like this is that it saves us the trouble of writing an entire system for developing pretty complicated quizzes from scratch. It's a plugin, and it's pretty user-friendly because it's a plugin for Microsoft PowerPoint that lets you create a quiz in PowerPoint. You then export it as an HTML, a folder full of HTML code. And then all we would need to do on the LawHelp side of things is create a feature that would let you upload that folder full of code and then display it as the completed quiz in the system. So that's the technique that we are exploring. If we pull it off.
URL for this in the chat? Just
absolutely. Yeah.
And it's a pretty
Or you
cool...
could talk to Julia, apparently.
Oh, does Julia have? Yeah, I mean, from the LawHelp New York perspective, we are, looking into acquiring this, and it's a pretty cool tool as far as like the types of quizzes you can create are it's much more than something you can do like in a Google Forms. You can do fill in the blank. You can do heat spots, having people click on a particular place. You can, it's pretty dynamic. And I think will be much more engaging than like a Google form, for example, so that people will actually want to do the quiz. That's what we're hoping, at least.
Well, it's always content, isn't it, really? What would be really cool is you just give them the article and they build the quiz out of the article. That would be a really cool tool.
Yeah, no kidding, huh?
Yeah, that would be very impressive. This is still something that people would have to write themselves, but PowerPoint is a tool that most folks are pretty familiar with. The interface for these is pretty straightforward, and then it produces output that can be that can just be displayed within any web page. So we the only reason why we have to think carefully about how to bring it into LawHelp at all is just for security reasons. So we're going to be standing up, the plan is to stand up a sort of sandboxed area where these things can live, so that just in case somebody uploaded a folder full of malicious code instead of one of these iSpring quizzes, it wouldn't be able to eat into the rest of the system. But that's where the thought has gone into. And so the all of the effort that would take to reproduce this kind of feature is not something that we had to worry about.
Yeah.
Okay, so there we were with metadata. Thank you so much for that question, Caroline.
I got another question about your natural language search. So.
Oh, go for it.
No, are you done talking about it?
Done talking about natural language search? Yeah, for now.
Yeah. Okay. So, and how close are you? I know we have to finish up. We're done in 4 minutes, right? So is there anything else you want to talk about before I ask you?
I can power through the last few, unless Audrey was planning a longer spiel at the end.
It's up to you guys.
No longer spiel from me.
All right.
Okay. So I'm curious about this because we're on Drupal, and I don't know if Solar is just Drupal or whether it's for all websites.
We're on Solar as well. It's not for all websites, but it's for you and it's for us.
Okay.
Yes.
So I don't use Solar, actually. I use Google Custom Search Engine.
Okay.
And I really like it because it's very, from a non-programmer, non-developer perspective, it's really easy to manipulate. I mean, it's always, everything's a learning curve, but it has the oral search. They have something called refinements, which I think I haven't had the time to go into it because it's been such a nightmare moving to Drupal. But I think that refinements work like faceted search. And I keep wondering why people I think your template, I get the template, that makes perfect sense. But in terms of natural language search, which EY bloody blah, is recommending,
Right.
Why is anybody even thinking about using anything other than Google? I just think Google, everybody knows Google's a verb in more than the English language. They're like the king of search. So why are we looking at other ways to search when they've already established themselves? And I realize Amazon does their faceted search, but it seems to me that we should be spending our energies on starting with the best and seeing how we can adapt it for ourselves.
Right. So here's the thing. From my perspective, I think it's absolutely something that we should look into. I've done some experiments where I've hacked the Google search into LawHelp in our staging environment to see what happens. And while we are, still using other Google products, most significantly Google Analytics, I think that there's no downside to using Google search. But the advantage of having a search engine that runs on a machine that you control, that you've stood up yourself, versus tying yourself into some cloud-based search, is the degree of visibility that you're giving a third party into the kind of activity that people are conducting on your website.
I see.
And as I said, as long as we're all using Google Analytics, it's irrelevant, because Google Analytics is it's a $1 billion beautiful video surveillance system that we get for free. But the trade-off is that they get to look at all of our video feeds as well, and they get way more value out of that than we do, because they can cross-reference the traffic patterns on our sites with everything else on the internet. So if you go into Google Analytics and you dig, you can see the charts where it's telling you the ages of the people that are visiting your site, and it can't know that just by looking at your site, right? No. It's getting that from the entire universe of the internet, and it has way more information than that, and it's giving you that additional sliver. I think is something that we should at least have a discussion about as a community, is whether that is a price that we're willing to pay for these free services. And I recognize that Google Custom Search, if you want to take out the baked-in advertising at the bottom, etc., is a paid service, but it's deeply discounted still if you consider the quality of the product that you're getting versus what they're charging you for it. And that's because you're also paying with giving them insight into all of this stuff, right? Yeah. And so I think it's worth having a conversation about the community about whether we want to create an environment where once people arrive on our site, however they arrive, their activity is opaque from the perspective of these Silicon Valley unicorn types. And for Google Analytics, the best way that I know of to get there is a lot of the techniques for that kind of stuff are coming out of Europe, because Europe has stronger regulations in this respect, is more concerned about the issue than we are. There's a platform called Piwik, which is a standalone analytics engine. So it's very similar to Google Analytics, probably not as powerful, and you would have to set it up and configure it and run it yourself. I'm not trying to claim that it's costless, but it does a lot of the things that we might need, and crucially, it's capable of being run on its own computer that you or whomever could control. And so if we were to make a decision that we wanted an opaque environment for people after they arrived, then that would extend to using something like Solar over Google, even though Google is better. But unless and until we decide that we want to, move away from Google Analytics, there's no upside. I agree.
Right. So, and also there's, is it AW Stats? Is that similar to Piwik as well, or is that different?
I'm not familiar with AW Stats.
Okay, that's it.
The key with Piwik, Piwik, the key feature that Piwik has, And there are a number of things that it does that are related to privacy. But there are various user privacy protection settings. Ironically, in some ways, you can actually sort of watch your users more carefully in Piwik than you can in Google, because Google's terms of service limits how much data you can collect. But
right, because they get it as well as you.
Right, because they get it as well as you. But it's
Yeah.
100% data ownership. You can have them host it, but cloud hosted Piwik is an option. But for me, this is the killer feature. The other advantage of this is that it's coded in PHP, and we could theoretically modify it if there were any features about it that didn't suit our needs. So in Google Analytics, for example, custom dimensions can only have one value. So if you had a custom dimension that said this article is about this topic, it could only be about a single topic. Whereas on the LawHelp template, at least, articles can be about many topics, and so it's limited our ability to do analysis directly in Google Analytics. We've come up with a system where we, push unique IDs in for each article, and then we do matching on the back end and reproduce the reports outside of Google Analytics. But it limits the ability that people have to use all the custom visualization tools in Google Analytics, etc. If Piwik had that kind of a limitation, we could just go in and modify that area of code. I'm not trying to say that it would be trivial to do. The amount of lift it would take,
yeah.
right? It would be possible in a way that it's not with Google Analytics.
Interesting.
I think so. All right, but yeah. So I think in general, if that's not a direction that we want to go in, your comment about Google makes a lot of intuitive sense. I am always for trying to take a load off of us and move it to some, move it out of house.
Yeah.
If our needs are no different from the needs of the web going populace, if the task we're trying to achieve is no different from a website for a cocktail bar or a Katy Perry fan page, we don't need to spend our limited resources on it. We can focus on the things that are really specific to legal stuff, like trying to come up with a definition for what a legal services website is, etc. All right, so project 3, we're 5 minutes over. I'll tear through this. As you may know, in 2016, we did a bunch of analytics work that included beginning to collect analytics data in Google Analytics about when users were using the location feature on LawHelp sites to try and come up with stuff. I've done some prototyping of chloropleth maps indicating where activity is, but the issue with those maps, as you can see, is that what we learned when we started tracking their use of the location feature is that on many of the LawHelp sites, the location feature is used very little. And so this map is very pretty, but as I hope you can tell, it's not very useful because the data is simply too thin. Only 1% of the immigration page views had location data associated with them, so this doesn't really tell us much. So another project that we're doing in partnership with Nassau Suffolk Law Services is to begin doing geolocation on LawHelp. When you visit a website and it says the website wants to know your location and you can opt out, initial research suggests that when you do it this way, rather than expecting people to affirmatively state their location by typing it in, you still don't get everybody, but you get a substantially larger portion of people. And not only that, but you get more granular information than you would otherwise. Although our ability to collect it down to the census block level, which is my dream, is limited by Google Analytics terms of service. You can't collect data that identifies a location within a square mile. So the closest we could get is zip codes. The reason to get down to census block level eventually would be that would give us the most granular view possible for correlating location with, poverty statistics. But we can get a little further. We can develop these maps a little more if we have a slightly larger sample size, and we're hoping that this kind of a feature will get us there. So we'll be, making some changes to collect the data, studying the data, etc. And then finally, an accessibility audit. EY emphasized accessibility issues across the LawHelp template and various other sites as well. We have remodulated our quality assurance process to try and make sure that we catch these issues more consistently as we develop new features. But the task of returning to all of the things that we have already done and identifying issues and then comprehensively, marching through and resolving them is simply too large to try and tackle on the fly in response to this report. And so the task of the audit will be to go through and identify all of these things, come up with a list, make a plan for completing them. And as we look toward the future for the LawHelp program, our goal will be to do this in a way such that we are developing techniques, building best practices, doing everything we can to ensure that this work, although it is happening within LawHelp 3, will have meaning and value for whatever comes next. And the reason why this slide looks the way it is that I want to emphasize to the community as early and often that the accessibility audit may involve visual changes to the LawHelp template. It may not. You may hear lots of emails about the accessibility audit, and then lots of grunting and sweating and strange noises, and then the code release comes out, and you open your website the next day to see what we did, and it looks the same. Because what we will be focusing on primarily when you do this kind of accessibility work is not what the website looks like, but what it sounds like. For visually impaired users, the entire internet is essentially an incredibly complex phone navigation system. Dial 1 for this, dial 2 for that. That's essentially their experience, and that experience can be more or less intuitive, more or less painful, depending on how accessible a given website is and the way in which it's structured. And so it may be that there are visual changes, it may not. There may never be a slide that can capture what we end up doing with the accessibility audit next year, because it's going to be about how the website talks. And then, of course, the other thing that's going to be happening in 2018 is going to be the continuation of this topic that we've been introducing over the course of the summer that Audrey spoke a little bit about earlier in the call. And that is that. Any further questions? My pleasure. Absolutely. Okay, everybody.
Sam.
Thank you. And in particular, thank you, Carolyn. As I hope everybody can see, so much more interesting stuff surfaces when this becomes a conversation. So I really appreciate your engagement on this call. All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye. Let's do the tapping. Yeah. The conversation.